NPA head Shaun Abrahams has made his decision about whether or not to prosecute former President Jacob Zuma. In a letter written to the Council for the Advancement of South Africa's Constitution, Abrahams says that he could announce the decision before the 15th of March. For more on this, I'm joined in studio by our political reporter Aldrin Sampear. Aldrin, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so this is the information that we've got, that he could announce the decision before the 15th, but you were explaining to me that he's essentially asking to have that 2-week notice period waived, which means he could announce at any time.
Yeah.
He's ready to make the announcement.
He's ready to make the announcement. Understand that CASAC had written to the NDPP saying that please give us a 2 weeks notice before you make the announcement. So now, if you look at the days, if you calculate the days, that would mean that the 15th of March would be the last day of the 2 weeks, because now he's already taken a decision. The only issue now is making the public announcement. So what he's basically asking for is that let's waiver this the 2-week notice period, and I could make the announcement even tomorrow, even today for that matter, because the decision has already been taken. And I understand that the entire leadership of the NDP of the NPA has also been informed by this decision that has been taken by the NDPP. Of course, also considering that you have the prosecutorial team that was working on this case on whether or not to go ahead with the prosecution of former President Jacob Zuma.
And should that prosecution go ahead, I mean, just to recap, we saw the SCA setting aside the decision to halt that case against the former president. So there are 18 charges, including fraud and corruption, that could be prepared in an indictment against the former president.
So the indictment will have to be served on the president, because if the decision is to go ahead with the prosecution, then the indictment, of course, will have to be served on President Jacob Zuma, or former President Jacob Zuma. But considering what the SCA said, that the decision to drop the charges back in 2009 by Mkoteri, who was the acting head of the NPA at the time, was irrational. And this has been conceded to by President Jacob Zuma's counsel as well. And that's the reason why the SCA case, which had been set down, I think at the time it was set down for about 2 or 3 days, it was done within a matter of hours because of these concessions that came through from the legal counsel that was representing President Jacob Zuma. So now the argument would be, what mitigating factors are there not to go ahead with the prosecution? And as I explained last week as well, that you'd remember that there is Johan van der Walt. He's the man who compiled this document that was used in the Shaun case, and which also found these corruption charges against President Jacob Zuma, or these corrupt dealings between alleged corrupt dealings between former President Jacob Zuma as well as Shaun. But Johan van der Walt is the same man who also compiled the SARS Rogue Unit report, which has now been withdrawn by KPMG, and there is this issue around his credibility. And last year already, when Jacob Zuma was still president of the country, the presidency issued a statement and saying that Johan van der Walt may be an interesting case to look into.
And there's also a bit of a tussle between whether or not Abrahams should make that announcement or not, because he's sort of fighting for his job, isn't he?
Yeah, he's certainly fighting for his job. Remember that the High Court took a decision, or the ruling was delivered on the 8th of December last year, where the High Court found that Nxasane's vacation of the NDPP was irregular, and has declared essentially that there's a vacancy within the NDPP, and that's the reason why they're appealing this at the highest court, the Constitutional Court. The argument from Shaun Abrahams is that you can't say that there is a vacancy, considering that I have been appointed to head that department, and whether or not the golden handshake given to Nxasane was unlawful should not even be something that's taken into consideration, because if you remember, even former NDPP Vusi Pikoli was given a handshake. I think it was 7-point-something million that was given to him, and there were several people who were appointed as NDPPs or either as acting NDPPs at the time. His argument, Shaun Abrahams' argument, that says that essentially means that all those appointments must have been irregular, including Nxasane's appointment, because he became the head of the NDPP after Menzi Simelane.
And he's also fighting for his job back. Yes,
Nxasane is fighting for his job back. His argument is that essentially with the court ruling stating that his vacation of that position was irregular, that means that he must then automatically be reinstated. He's also arguing against the findings of the court, which found that he comes at a quote-unquote certain price, and that's the reason that he has accepted the 17.3 million rand. The other argument that the court also made, or the finding that the court made, is that he must have known that what he was doing was unlawful, that this golden handshake was unlawful, it doesn't meet constitutional muster and so forth. Ngasana's argument is that you can't make such a finding if you had not accepted my affidavit. Remember that the court rejected his affidavit, and that's the reason why we didn't hear from Ngasana's side about what happened. But in these new court papers at the Constitutional Court, he also details the political interference by quote-unquote our highest target, and that highest target, of course, being Jacob Zuma, the former president of the country.
So then if you look at this from a legal perspective, it seems like there could be many loopholes for the former president to kind of get through based if he is served.
Yeah, well, certainly he can still make an argument in saying that there has been interference in the case, or he believes that there's no case against him, or the prosecution itself has been so tainted, and because it has taken this long, it means that his rights to justice have also been abused. And he could go to court and argue for a permanent stay. And this has already been something that has been indicated after the Supreme Court of Appeal's ruling.
Interesting times. Aldrin, thank
Indeed.
you. Thank you very much for that. Our Aldrin Sampear just unpacking the latest developments with regard to NPA head Shaun Abrahams, saying that he is ready to make that decision on whether or not the former president will be charged.